Welcome back to another episode of Modified Rides Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Burrell. I like to interview people that are somewhat heavy hitters, industry leaders, icons, I guess you'd say, in the automotive aftermarket world. Today, I have someone that I worked with for a few years for a couple magazines. Today, we have Travis Noack. What's up, Travis?
How's it going, Brandon? Thanks for having me on today, man.
I know we've been playing tag a little bit. You're not as heavily ingrained in the automotive world. You get to play with $1 million properties all the time now, I guess. So
Yeah, that's what I'm doing these days. I'm slinging industrial real estate, warehouse buildings. It's a family business, myself, my dad, and my oldest sister. And so I play with cars still from a hobby perspective, from a passion, perspective, but it's not my full-time gig anymore.
So I guess with you living outside of Vegas, I guess the commercial real estate's kind of a hot commodity in that area nowadays.
Yeah, Vegas is really blowing up for industrial real estate properties. A lot of companies are moving here from other states, mainly California, and products just going up at rapid rates. So we're busy. It's exciting times in our business and our arena. But you didn't ask me on here to talk about that. Let's talk about trucks, man. Let's talk
For
about
sure.
fun. Let's talk about fun stuff.
Well, people's got to know where you've disappeared to, I guess. So with you living outside of Vegas, you didn't live there your whole life. You grew up in California, correct?
I did. I grew up in a community called Torrance, California, and for those who don't know geographically where that is, it's Redondo Beach, Manhattan Beach. We're kind of a stone's throw from. I always use LAX airport as kind of a reference point. It's LA adjacent, and it's a beach community. I grew up about a mile from the ocean, and grew up surfing, skateboarding, riding and racing BMX bikes, all that kind of stuff. And so that area was very, ripe for car culture, especially in the era that I was, growing up there in the 80s and 90s. It was, lowered Volkswagens, Bugs, buses, custom, mini trucks, full-size trucks. And the just being by the beach, it was all sort of tailored for cruising, and everybody fixed up their trucks and their minis and their Volkswagens. So that was some of my early influence.
So did you get tied into the vehicles, the modified stuff early? Like, I guess if you were spending your time surfing and skateboarding, you probably went from a skateboard wheels to car wheels pretty quick.
Absolutely. I mean, I did all that stuff, surfing, skateboarding, BMX bikes, all that. And, the BMX bikes and the skateboarding, is probably responsible for a lot of the early sort of mechanical part of my journey. You take things apart, you change, wheels on the skateboard for different, terrain that you're going to skate. You tune up your BMX bikes, for a race. You take apart the cranks, you take apart, things on the bike to get it ready for an event. But prior to that, I mean, really, and like a lot of people, my influence, was my dad. I mean, he could never leave anything alone, vehicle wise. Our family, vehicles were always modified in some way, shape, or form, whether it was wheels and tires, suspension, paint. He always liked to trick things out. And I just kind of, grew up with a dad that, we got a car and it didn't stay stock for long. It either got, wheels and tires, or it got a lowering kit, or, what have you. I mean, for example, I grew up in a boating family too. And so our tow vehicles were always customized. Like, they always matched the boat. They always had the same paint scheme, graphics, wheels and tires, all that kind of stuff. And so not only my dad and kind of like the SoCal influence of cruising culture, and then the mechanical part of, racing BMX and skateboarding and all that kind of led into the vehicles. But going to the lake and the river as a kid, like, I was also influenced by what was in the parking lot, like what was pulling that badass, hot rod boat. It was usually in those days like a slammed square body dually, that was graphicked and painted to match the boat, or, then I remember when OBSs came out in '88, and, people started fixing those up and lowering them and modifying them and doing, roll pans and smoothie bumpers, all that, to have something cool to go to the river to pull their boat with. So that was also another kind of part of my influence, as a young kid, watching all this cool stuff at the lake and the river, and in combination with, my dad modifying our own, family hot rods, basically.
So when you got your license, did you get a hand-me-down from your dad that was already customized, or did you start tinkering on your own?
No, when I was 15 and a half, we started kind of looking for my first truck, and we got an '83 GMC Sierra 1500 square body short bed, and it was a little 350 in it. It was lowered, and it had, hold on, my dogs are going nuts and they're driving me crazy. Hold on. Get out. Get out of here. Get out. Yeah. All right. Sorry about that. Yeah, my first truck was an '83 GMC square body shorty, and we lowered it. I mean, it was lowered when I got it, but we kind of redid the suspension, lowered it more, updated it, put some billet wheels on it, and, tweed interior, which I'm definitely dating myself. Tweed interior was the thing back in the early '90s, but
been there, done that.
Yeah, did the kind of detailed the undercarriage out and chromed out the motor and all that, and took it to a bunch of shows. I mean, that was kind of my introduction into the kind of the show truck world and the mini truck scene, if you will. Was going to a lot of shows throughout SoCal and Arizona. And
in high school or after?
Pretty much after high school. I pretty much just drove it to high school and, cruised it around, Torrance and Redondo Beach, and put my surfboard in the back of it, put my BMX bike in the back of it, that type of thing. Cruised around with friends, as you do in high school. And then after high school, I think it was my senior year, we were getting ready to graduate, and I went to my first truck run, and it was Resolutions '94. And I called up Bob Hayes from the ad in Truckin' Magazine, and I'm like, hey, I really want to come to your show. I have this truck, I've been fixing it up, and I'm starting to kind of get into the show scene and getting into this, world, if you will. But there's only one problem. I'm only 17, and you had to be 18 to get into that show. Said right on the flyer in Truckin' Magazine, must be 18, years to attend, So I called him up and kind of pled my case, and he was like, I'll tell you what, get a note from your parents and present it at the gate, and I'll let you in. And so that was kind of where it all started, was Resolutions '94. And I remember it clear as day. It was Lake Paris Fairgrounds, and me and a high school buddy drove out there and, and participated in the show and did the whole truck run experience, camped in a tent and everything. And I was just hooked from there. And then, so it was, after that, it was Endless Summer, Spring Splash, more Rezos, West Coast Nationals, pretty much every show that Bob put on, in addition to a lot of other shows.
The West Coast icon shows.
Yeah, exactly. The truck runs, the river runs, if you will, on the banks of the Parker Strip, Colorado River. And it kind of combined everything that I loved and I grew up with, because it was a truck show, but it was on the river. So there was boats and, and then we did a lot of local shows too, in California Truck Jamboree, which was put on by Al Martinez, Auto Body and Paint. And that was a really cool show. You actually had to interview basically to get into that show. You had to send in pictures of your truck, a list of modifications.
That's the way Mini Nats is now.
Yeah, I thought it was a really cool concept, because they basically got the best stuff at that event, because you had to go through a process. Al would sit down with his team and they would look at pictures and the list of mods and everything, and they'd say either yay or nay, you know. And I thought it was good too, because it would inspire people like, hey, yeah, I didn't make the cut this year, but I'm gonna push and do this, that, and the other thing to my truck, and hopefully next year, you know, they'll see what I've done and they'll say, yeah, this truck can get in. But yeah, we did a lot of shows throughout SoCal and Arizona and some in Nevada, but yeah, and then it just kind of transitioned from there, you know, from actually owning a show truck and building one to wanting to take it to the next level into a kind of a career, if you
Yeah.
will. And I had kind of wanted to do that work when I was young, like in middle school. I kind of started figuring out that I really wasn't a numbers person. I was more of a literary person, a lot more of a journalistic, creative writing, storytelling. I think that's where my skill set and my aptitude was. Um, and I loved anything hot rods or trucks or custom cars, you
Yeah.
know, and it just kind of was raised around it. So it made sense to put those two together and turn it into a career, um, which is what I did for, gosh, 14, 15 years. Um, and it really all started like in college, because I was trying to figure out, you know, what I was going to do when I got out of school. And that's what I really wanted to do. So I applied for an internship at Sport Truck Magazine, Peterson Publishing, and got on there. Just, you know, it was basically to fulfill college credit. But what I was really interested in, deeper than the class credit, was the experience I was going to get from, you know, interning there at Peterson and learning the ins and outs of the magazine business.
You were going to
Um,
school for journalism, or?
yeah, I was going to school for journalism. Communications was my, you know, quote unquote major, but was an emphasis on journalism. And my family was a little skeptical. They're like, well, you know, we're behind you, but what are you going to do with that? You know, like when you get out of school, how are you going to make money? What are you going to do? And I basically told them, like, look, I've had my head buried in, you know, custom car magazines, truck magazines for ever since I was a little kid. That's what I want to do. Like, I want to travel and go to shows and photograph people's, you know, custom cars and trucks and write about them, tell their story, tell their journey. Um, and so I went to school and got, you know, a communications journalism degree and a BA in communications from Loyola Marymount University. And then when I graduated, actually before I graduated, I got the internship at Peterson, through a guy named Tom Moore. I have to remember kind of how it all went down, but I think I answered an ad or something that he had taken out, and I went and interviewed with him, and he gave me the spot, and I just kind of did whatever that they needed me to do. You know, it wasn't real glamorous work as far as magazines go. It was like all the stuff that you really don't want to do, like readers' rides and new products and answering, you know, letters, readers' letters, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
None of the stuff that the actual editors wanted to do, right? But I was like, you know what, it's okay. I'm going to learn. So I did that for probably a year and a half, and then school was over, and I graduated, and when I got out, there really wasn't like a magazine opportunity right away. So I ended up going to work for a grocery store for a little while, when I got out of school, and just kind of stocked shelves for a while. And then I got a phone call. It was probably 6, 8 months after I graduated from college, and the guys at Sport Truck were like, "Hey, we're looking for a staff editor. Are you interested?" And I'm just like, "Absolutely." You know, your call couldn't come at a more perfect time, because I actually absolutely hate what I'm doing right now. Um, so I went and interviewed with them, and they already kind of obviously knew me because I had interned there, and so that was a door opener. Um, and then they hired me, and I worked there for, it was probably like a year and a half. And
What
then
year is this?
trucking was, what was that?
What year is this?
98
Okay.
is when I started there, and I think I worked there through like late 99. I remember clearly I was working there when the then new like 99 to 06 GM Chevy body style truck came out. Because I remember we had one of the very first ones, and I remember photographing it for the magazine. So I was definitely there in that time period. And then early 2000s, Truckin' called me, and they're like, "Hey, we're looking for somebody." And at the time, I don't know, I really wasn't kind of seeing eye to eye with the editor at Sport Truck. So it was a good move. Like Truckin' was like, "Hey, we're looking for somebody, and what are your thoughts?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm really ready to make a move." So I went over to Truckin', and
that was still in the same building at that time, though, wasn't it?
no,
There was two different companies.
it was two different companies. Yeah, Sport Truck was owned by Peterson Publishing at that time, and Truckin' was owned by McMullen Argus Publishing.
Yeah.
So I got a call from Kevin Wilson, who was the editor of Truckin' at that time, and he was kind of moving on to go to the editorial director position to manage the group. They were going to appoint a new editor.
Yeah.
So someone was going to be moving up, and they needed a new feature editor basically. So he called me up and he's like, "Hey, we need you, and if you're up for it." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm ready to make a move." So I went over there. That was in June of 2000, and I was there from June of 2000 to October of 05. And then kind of the same thing happened, like with Street Trucks. They had gone through obviously some as you well know, some changes. Like Steve had left, Courtney had left, and Brian had left. The originators, the guys who started it all at Street Trucks, they left, and so they were looking to restaff Street Trucks. And so I got a hold of a guy named John Stewart. He was the editorial director at the time, and I'm like, "Hey, I'm looking to make a move. I'm not really moving up, kind of how I was hoping for at Truckin'." And he's like, "Yeah, dude, we'd love to have you." So I went over and interviewed with him, and I think 2 weeks later, I made the move, and I was there from October of 05. I remember it very clearly because it was like 2 weeks before SEMA that year. And it was crazy because I was making a move. I was having to finish getting ready for the show. I had to get new business cards printed. Like it was a chaotic time.
Who was running it then? Because that was after Brian and Courtney and all of them left, right?
Yeah, Jeremy was there, but he was a skeleton crew. He was a staff of one.
It was him and Mike then, wasn't it?
Yeah, Mike was. Was Mike still there? No, I don't think Mike was still there. I think he had left as well, and he was kind of just freelancing. And so I came in and joined up with Jeremy, and then we just started knocking the book out. And I remember it was like a blitz because, like I said, it was like two weeks, I think, ish before SEMA, and there was a ton of material to turn out. And Jeremy was just, he was doing the best he could, but it was just one guy. So I came in and was, hammering out a bunch of stuff too. And we were just trying to get our bearings. It's like, hey, this is a new office. This is a new, a new, production staff. This is a new art staff. Like we were just, but we didn't. We had to come in and just basically plug in and just go to work because it was just trying to get the magazine put together. Because those guys kind of left. They didn't really provide like a bunch of notice. It was just, hey, we're moving on, and they kind of moved on. So
Jeremy ran it after they all left to begin with.
Yes. Yeah, for a little while, and then I moved over, and then let's see. I think I took over as editor in, God, what was it? Like, it was probably early 06, if I remember correctly. It was probably early 06, maybe mid 06. And then I was there from October of 05 to December of 11. So just a shade over 6 years.
Gotcha.
Um,
That means you were trucking when my first cover ran then, because that was the February 05 issue.
yeah, I would have still been there. Yeah, it wasn't much of a, like, there wasn't much of a lag time. I mean, I gave trucking, I think 2 weeks, and I knew I was going to street trucks, and I was really surprised, like, that when I gave them my 2 weeks notice, that they didn't, and told them where I was going, that they weren't just like,
Bye.
it's been real, Noack, but you can go ahead and pack your stuff now. They kept me for 2 weeks, and it was cool. I hung around and knocked out a few more stories, and but I got to admit, that last 2 weeks was a little painful. I was really excited to get over to ST and start, because I had always admired street trucks. From the first time it came out, and having known the guys who put it together and were originally on staff there, I knew it was going to be cutting edge. I knew it was going to be the best of the best. I knew it was going to be the most killer trucks on the scene at that time. And they set the bar really, really high. So when I came in, I'm like, okay, we have big shoes to fill here, because these guys did not put anything subpar in the book. And then also the level of the photography, with Brian,
Yeah.
was absolutely second to none. So, and I got to hand it to Johnny O on that one, because he is an amazing photographer, very, very talented. I was always decent, behind the lens, but I wouldn't call myself, I was never on the level of like Johnny O or Brian McCormick or
Very few people are.
Yeah, I mean, those guys are absolute artists. But I had the gift of, in the creative side, in the writing ability, that was my strength and my talent. I got better with photography over the years, just by doing it. I'm kind of one of those people. I just sharpen my skills by doing.
Same.
I'm not going to learn much if I was sitting in a class and someone's telling me, about depth of field and f-stops and, shutter speed and all that. I mean, I know what all that stuff is, and I know how a camera works, and I know how to manipulate a camera, but I always learned by being out in the field and by actually doing it and failing and screwing up.
Seeing what works and what didn't. Yeah.
Exactly. I can remember in the early days, man, when way before digital, when it was just rolls of 35 millimeter film, and I would go to a show with like 100 rolls of 35 millimeter film, and come home, and I would be nervous, like the whole flight home, like, God, I hope this shit turned out all right. I hope it came out, because there's no reshooting it. Like, at least with digital, it was like I could get back to my hotel room that night and download everything and be like, fuck yeah, I nailed it, man. Awesome. Or I got to go talk to that guy tomorrow because I just obviously wasn't in my zone because this stuff turned out like crap, and I'm not going to let it go. I'm not going to run it that way, So it was fun, man. I felt like I was able to be a lot more creative, when I got to street trucks, because Jeremy and I were running it, and then eventually I took over and was the editor.
Is that
we
when
had a lot more
when he left to go to
freedom.
trucking?
What was that?
Is that when he left to go to trucking? When Jeremy left?
No, I took over as the editor. Like I said, dude, it's we're going back a ways, so I'm relying on the old memory, but I want to say it was maybe like mid 06. Might have been late 06. Jeremy was still there. So, and it was cool. I mean, we still really worked well together. We collaborated. We shared ideas. We shaped the magazine together. And it was a really good run, dude. It was a great ride. I had a lot of fun. It was kind of different than any other editorial position or magazine job I'd had prior to that, because there was really no limits. There was no rules. It was like, no, we're going to put the baddest stuff, the baddest trucks in this magazine, and we're not going to bow down to anybody. Like, we're not going to conform. We're not going to tailor the magazine to fit some advertising gain or some, we're not going to structure it where it's clearly or blatantly being assembled to service someone other than the reader. It was only for the reader. And we sold magazines. I mean, like, we outsold trucking. Like, we outsold Sport Truck. We kicked ass because we didn't compromise. We put the best stuff in the book, the best photography and the best quality, and we had a barometer. And it wasn't like I'm not gonna just shoot this truck to shoot it because I'm here. I'm gonna get the best stuff that's here. And maybe that guy next year, maybe he'll be ready. Maybe his interior will be, redone, or maybe his engine compartment will be, finished, or, what have you. But we weren't just going to shoot trucks to shoot them and put them in the book.
That's the way I felt when I was doing it, because it's like you have to have the best of the best in that aspect in order to set it above everybody else. You can't just have the half-ass subpar stuff.
Right. Yeah, I mean, otherwise it's like you might as well just read Truck Trends, or whatever. This isn't Consumer Reports, it's the baddest of the bad custom trucks to roll the planet, and that's what we strived for.
I always called it a dream book. To me, that was the dream book that the average kid in high school or college, that's like, I want this one day. When you flip through it, like, that's the truck I want. Not,
that's right.
My buddy's got one that he drives to the grocery store every day,
Right. Yeah, and I mean, it's dream world stuff. It's motivational stuff. We did have to mix in some stuff that, was relatable.
Yeah.
That the average guy could, or girl could kind of grip onto and afford to do, or with a garage sort of skill level with basic tools could do. We tried to accomplish a lot of that through some of the tech, where it was like, yeah, you could do this on a Saturday in your garage with, with a basic set of tools and some friends. You could accomplish this modification.
Yeah.
But as far as the feature trucks and the cover trucks and the event coverage, and we were portraying the lifestyle, of not just being Street Trucks was never the book for the casual enthusiast. Like, it was the book for the guy that's been, into this since he was a kid and is going to be into this into his 60s and 70s, that's what the book was tailored for. That's what it was designed for. And that's why I think when it started, Brian and Courtney and Steve were such a good team, because, you had Steve, okay, he was the quintessential at the time, like the older guy, right, who was into F100s and 55-7 Chevy pickups and things like that, where they were more kind of the older man's truck. Not to say they weren't nice and they weren't like the caliber that should be in the book and modified and all that, but Steve kind of had the classic truck ground sort of covered, right? And then you had Brian, who was more like, 67 to 72 C10s and Blazers, and then square bodies and OBSs and two-door Tahoes and that whole sport truck, 90s OBS, smooth, billet wheels, roll pan, that whole era. Brian was kind of the shepherd of that. And then you had Courtney, who was the mini truck guy. And he would go out and get the features on the badass Mazdas and the Toyotas and the hard bodies and the S10s and all that stuff, because he used a negative camber, right? So he had been entrenched in that mini truck scene and world for so long. He already, when they started Tree Trucks, those guys already knew everybody. Like, Courtney already knew who to call. He already knew who to get a hold of, who was building, the baddest of the bad minis. Shit, half of them were in his club. So he would just pick up the phone and go, hey, I know you're working on this. When's it going to be done? We need it for our next issue or whatever. So it was a dream team from the start, because those guys each had, the ground covered in the different segments of the custom truck, market, if you will. So it was, and it was genius when they launched it, because they didn't even have a magazine. I remember we were at Parker one year for, I want to say it was like Spring Splash or West Coast Nationals or Endless Summers, one of the river runs. And they had a big trailer set up, and they had all this street trucks marketing, like stickers, hats, shirts, little like place cards that were, 5x7 place cards with the logo and little, bullet points and pictures and all this stuff. And they didn't even have the first issue out. It was just, they were building all this momentum and all this hype and all this interest behind a magazine that wasn't even out yet. Like, you couldn't even hold it in your hands or flip through it. But it built up
the way the new mini trucking's doing.
Yeah, it's like they were building up all this, the curiosity factor, right?
Yeah.
Which was friggin' flippin' genius, dude. It was huge, because by the time it came out, they already had so much pent up demand that when the magazine hit the newsstand, it was just gone. And at the time, it was so cutting edge, and it was different than anything else that was out there at the time. Like, Sport Truck was doing the whole, performance truck thing, like corner carving trucks, Corvette swaps, big brakes, sway bars, coilover suspension, like meant to go around a corner. And that was their thing, right? And then trucking was kind of like the buffet of basically everything, like, full sizes, minis, classics. But they didn't have the same, I'm not taking anything away from trucking. Like, I was there at that time, but
Yeah.
they didn't have the level of discernibility with the trucks. Like, they would not, if an engine compartment wasn't finished, they just wouldn't shoot it, right? They would still shoot the truck and feature it, but they wouldn't obviously shoot the engine compartment. Whereas street trucks would be like, okay, well, the truck's really bitching, but the engine compartment's not finished. Give us a call once you get the engine compartment done, and we'll shoot it, or give us a call when you don't have Prelude seats in there anymore and you've actually done the interior. We'll feature it. We'll shoot it.
The thing with me being a freelancer for everybody, I knew when I'd go to a show, this is a mini truck and shoot, this is a sport truck shoot. Like, I could shoot the different styles myself and then just, distribute them to the right magazines, because everybody had their own look back then.
Sure. No, absolutely. And yeah, Street Trucks was just like, they had a bar, man, and they did not go below it. And I think one of the most enjoyable experiences of doing it was, and I told someone else this on another pod one time, was like the challenge of recreating the product every month, to basically, there was certain reliability things in the magazine that the readers counted on, right? And that's why they bought it. But you also had to change it up enough so that it didn't look like last month's issue.
Yeah.
It had to be different enough that it had a different sort of feel as you leafed through it, but it had to have certain reliable things in it that were in it every month. And that was one of the things, like, we didn't screw with the package too much, because there were certain things in there that readers just came to really appreciate and love about the product. So we weren't going to take that away from them, but it was by far the most exciting magazine that I worked at, I really enjoyed my chapter there at ST.
You were probably there the longest at that point then, wasn't you? I mean, throughout from beginning until now, if you were there, what'd you say, 6 years?
A little over 6 years. It was like 6 years and I don't know, 2 months or something like that. I remember very clearly. I left. It was right. It was like 2 days after Christmas in 2011. Was my last day there.
And you just decided that time to go back into the family business and leave that all behind, or
Yeah, I was burned out, you know. For anybody who's ever done this type of work, or done this job or been in this position as an editor, and you know, you travel a lot and you live out of a suitcase quite a bit, sleep in different hotel rooms and bounce around, and that was really great when I was, in my 20s and early to mid 30s. But when you get a little older, I think your perspective kind of changes and you want to be a little more grounded, So that was really one of the reasons. Was I was just putting in incredible hours. We didn't have a huge budget at that time, and so I didn't have, it was just a couple of us on staff, and so I was jumping in as the editor. I was jumping in and traveling too. I was going to shows all over the place and shooting features and covers and shooting tech and writing tech and making the run sheet every month and kind of keeping on top of the freelance, contributions and making sure everyone got paid, balancing the budget. And it just got to be a little much. And I was never home. So I think that was the other thing. I was married at the time and had a stepchild, and I wasn't home much, and that was kind of weighing on me. They never really complained, but it was weighing on me, So it was time to do something different, I had kind of rang the chamois, if you will, on the custom truck, magazine and publishing, business.
yeah.
And I had achieved everything I wanted to achieve. I was able to be the editor of Street Trucks and met a lot of really awesome people that I'm still friends with to this very day, and traveled around the country and shot a lot of really great trucks. I got a lot of really great memories from it, and
Built a lot of cool trucks.
Built a lot of cool trucks and friends just still to this day across the country, that I would never have met otherwise. I guess I can't say that. I mean, social media definitely has a play now in how you connect with people, but it's different. It's not the same as hanging out with Doug from Spring Fling, the guy that, helped put on Spring Fling in Florida. I mean, real quick story. One year I went there, and I'd gone to that show, a handful of years in a row, and I got into town and had a day to kill. And I'm like, Doug, hey, is there anywhere to get a haircut around here? Like, I didn't get a chance to get, cleaned up before I left California. And he goes, well, what kind of haircut are you looking for? And I'm like, in those days, I'd just been buzzing my head, right? And he goes, well, shit, my roommate can do that for you. So they set up a chair on the back patio at their house in the sticks, and the guy came out and just shaved my head, and like while I was drinking a beer. Like, I'll never forget that, and it's experiences like that and people across the country that's just one story. I've got countless other ones, but
I think any of us been in it in a while has those stories that you don't think about till someone brings them up, and you're like, oh yeah, I remember that was a fun weekend. Or
absolutely, man. And those are the things that I cherish, to this day. And I've been out of it for, gosh, 12 years now.
wow, I guess it hasn't been that long.
Yeah, it's been a while. I mean,
I remember the first time I met you in person. I want to say it was at SEMA 09. I remember you were setting a truck up on the front sidewalk.
okay.
I don't remember which truck that was then. I remember you had unloaded it and was setting it up on the front sidewalk in between Central and South.
Okay, that probably was Operation Muscle Truck, the 95 standard cab short bed that we did. And I'm pretty sure that was the one, because I think I took that to SEMA in 09. But
I want to say it had an engine in the bed, something sitting in the bed.
That's it.
Yeah,
that was it. Yeah, and we were pushing it around because it didn't run. Typical SEMA build, right? It didn't run. But But hey, I mean, engines are overrated. Like, I mean, being able to drive it's overrated. It just had to sit there and look cool, for
Well, I know that,
a week.
like we had talked through emails and calls or whatnot over that time. And I remember like we were there early, checking things out. And I was like, that's Travis's truck. I'd seen stuff in the magazine or whatever. It's like, that's got to be Travis. I remember the first time I'd met you in person. And it's like, you're on the West Coast, I was on the East Coast. We hardly ever see each other. So to actually meet you in person at that time, like that was a memorable moment for me as a freelancer.
Oh, that's cool, man. I appreciate that. I always just looked at this as like, you know what, I'm just living my dream. I'm doing my dream job. I get to do my dream job every day. Like I get to go to work and write about cool trucks and the people that, own them and build them and have worked very hard to, over the years to create their vision of cool. And that was always the best part about it. It was being able to tell someone else's story, like, because everybody has a story with how they got into this, why they're into this, why they built a particular truck, and I think that was always the best part was like, some guy built this 68 C10 because his grandpa had one when he was a little boy and took him for ice cream in it. Or even better, it was like actually that truck, and those are the best, to me, those are the best stories, throughout this stuff is people are connected to these vehicles, for one reason or another. I mean, my first truck was a square body. So naturally I love square bodies. I mean, I'm redoing my 74 right now because it's basically emulates what I drove in high school. And every single time I get in that truck, I'm 17 years old again.
Taken back in time. Yep. So
Exactly.
on the truck topic, let's go back to your progression with trucks because you've had some pretty iconic trucks over the years. You've bounced around, I guess, a couple clubs or whatnot. So when did you start getting into doing the heavy modification and the clubs and all that stuff? Like, how did that work?
It was right around 95 that I had my black, 83 Shorty that was my high school truck, and that kind of carried it, on to a couple years into college that I drove that and showed it. And Extreme Lows, the LA chapter was, Adam Madrigal, who is a very good mutual friend of yours and mine, and Mike Sclementi and
Old Sclim.
Mark Pacheco and a bunch of guys. They were living in Westchester, which was down by the LAX airport, and I was in Torrance. I was probably like, in those days, maybe 30 minutes, from them. And I was kind of looking for a club, a group of people to hang out with, and they sort of recruited me, and I started hanging out and sort of petitioning and going to meetings and going to shows and all that stuff. And I was in that club for, gosh, I want to say like 5 or 6 years. I kind of bowed out a few times because I got really busy with school. I was in college at the time when I first started, and I just got really busy with studies and everything else, and I just didn't have much time for the club. But they always welcomed me back with open arms. And then I went off to, career and all that, and got into the magazine stuff. And I think at the time I kind of felt like it wasn't really appropriate for me to be in a club as a magazine person, as a magazine editor. I didn't want anyone to think that I was, giving allegiance to any one group of people.
Totally understand on that. I did the same thing.
Yeah. So I kind of gracefully bowed out, and they really were cool. They really understood. And we still talked and hung out, and I would see him at the shows and stuff, and would always, hang out, and we would BS and stuff. And then I think I didn't get back into another club until Relaxed Atmosphere. And that was after I'd left the magazine business. I had that 56 F100 pickup at the time, and was kind of hanging around a lot of those guys, Ruben Artiaga and some of the original Relaxed guys. Mike Shartzis is an old friend of mine, you know, from back in the day. He
Yeah.
was kind of another influence of mine to get into the magazine, you know, business from the early days, you know, at Sport Truck and all that. Mike taught me a lot. In addition to Courtney Hollowell, I mean, I owe a tremendous amount to Courtney. He was very instrumental in my early days in that career and that business. But I'm getting off topic. It was like the Grand National Roadster Show, I think, 2012. They gave me a logo, Relax logo, and I liked the guys in the club. I liked the people in the club. Everyone was just really cool and down to earth, and I liked the barometer of vehicles, like the quality, the level of vehicles, and so they gave me a logo, and I've been a Relaxed member ever since. I mean, I'm not real active,
Yeah.
just because of my other, you know, responsibilities, business, and everything else. I kind of hang out, you know, a few times a year with the people over here in the Vegas chapter. We're small, but and then the Cali guys all come to town, you know, for SEMA, and we always get together at SEMA, but there's just not as much available time, you know,
Yeah.
anymore for regular, you know, outings. And I must admit, like, my trucks, you know, for the last handful of years haven't been the most like reliable. I mean, I think I'll probably come out a lot more once my square body's done, because I'm in the midst of it's actually almost done. I did motor swap, tranny swap, EFI, and some other goodies to make it more drivable. So I think once it's all done and driving and dialed in, I'll probably be out kind of more, and I'll be like, people are like, Travis is calling us? What the hell? Like, where's he been for the last, you know, 3 years?
Well, you skipped over some trucks in that era though, because you had wasn't Red Rocker during the street trucks days.
Red Rocker was actually during the trucking days. That was built at Truckin' Magazine in '03 is when that project started, and it carried into '04, and then it was debuted at the '04 SEMA show. So
Well,
that truck
the
was
first time
built
I
in.
ever went was '04.
Okay, that was a good year. There was a lot of really nice stuff at the show that year.
That's your first full out high end build like that was Red Rocker?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I had an OBS before that. That was pretty cool. It was a 90 standard cab, and I had that at Truckin' as well, kind of early on when I was first there. And when I started there, it was just lowered, you know, with some, gosh, dating myself again, 17-inch centerline billets on it, which was what
Which was
everybody
huge
ran.
back then.
Yeah, and that's what everybody ran back in the, you know, the 90s, because they looked cool and they were cheap. But I got to Truckin', and you know, I was like, yeah, I want to kind of do some more stuff to this truck. So I ended up putting on like an air ride tech setup and four linked it and bagged it, and then we did just 18s and 20s, you know, Boyds. That was kind of the thing at that time, was
Yeah.
18s and 20s were pretty popular. And then did a nice interior in it and a nice bed kit, and had Steve Deman at Color Kings flame it. And so I had that one was pretty nice, but it wasn't the caliber like of Red Rocker. Like, you know, Red Rocker was all shaved, um you know, it had that full street rod, you know, interior, and
Didn't Hills
kind of
Hot
the
Rod build
one-off
it?
dash. What's that?
Didn't Hills Hot Rod build that one?
Hills Hot Rods built that one, and then they also built the F100. Yeah.
Well, I know the Red Rocker wound up making back. I guess Fester still owns it, or has he sold it since he bought it?
No, he still has it. That truck, when I sold it in late '06. I showed it for maybe just shy of 2 years. I think the best part about that truck is I drove that thing everywhere. It was so fun to drive. And but when I sold it, it ended up going back to a guy in Virginia, and he owned a stereo shop. So he kind of bought it to promote his stereo shop. He only had it a few years, and then he sold it to a guy named Max Heersink, and he lives up in Alberta, Canada. And he is kind of cool because he had followed that whole build through the magazine, and he was like just a kid at that time. I mean, he was like 13, 14 years old, and he'd followed the whole build and had kind of wanted like eventually to own that truck or recreate it. And his dad was a long haul trucker. And so he would go on these trips with his dad, and they would go through Texas a lot. So he would stop at Hill's Hot Rods, and he introduced himself and was like, "Hey, I've been following your work, and I'm really into trucks, and I want to, I love that red rocker truck, and I love to own that thing someday, and or build one like it." And so he got to know the guys at Hills, and they kind of took him under his wing, and they would let him hang out while his dad would go, finish his route.
Yeah.
And they taught him a lot of stuff, and he just became friends with all of them. And then and him and I have been friends for years now. Like he eventually was able to put together the money, and that truck actually came up for sale from the guy in Virginia, and Max was able to buy it. And I remember at the time, God, he was probably 19 years old. And he came to SEMA one year with the Hills guys, and it was actually funny because he was still like maybe 19 or 20. He wasn't even legal to drink, so he couldn't even go into a lot of the places that we were going. but yeah, no, that's a good story. Max was the caretaker of that truck for, gosh, probably 8 or 10 years. He had it a really long time, and then sold it back to the Hills guys. And they had it for, I don't know, maybe 2 years or something. And Max had done a lot of really cool stuff to it. He put a 6.0, LS in it, and some other stuff. But he maintained kind of the look of it. He never changed the look. And then Fester ended up buying it when Hills took it to Barrett, along with maybe it was Meekum. One of the auctions, they took a lot of their trucks to Meekum and sold them, and Red Rocker was one of them, and Fester actually was the one who ended up getting it.
I remember seeing a post with you and Fester at a show with it, so thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, no, that was cool because that was Dino's 2020, so it was COVID. I mean, and like it was kind of a weird Dino's because he was having to make sure everyone was wearing masks and all that stuff, but the truck was there, and I hadn't seen the truck in person since the day I sold it, and it went on the transport and left. So it had been like 14 years since I sold it, and I got to see it again, and I got to sit in it, and Fester was super cool to let me drive it. We just cruised around the parking lot, but he said, next time you come to Arizona, you call me, and we'll go get on the freeway, and I'll let you really drive it,
Nice.
Yeah. Out of all of them, man, if I could get any of them back, I think it would be that one.
Where's the Ford at now?
The Ford, it's funny you asked. The Ford is in Lake Havasu. It's not terribly far from me. I live in Boulder City, Nevada. I'm probably 2 hours from Havasu. But it's kind of funny, that truck bounced around. It when I sold it, it went to Arkansas. The guy that bought it was a farmer, and he didn't have it very long. He had it maybe a year, and then he sold it again. And the guy that bought it was owned a Ford dealership in Texas. So it went from Texas to California, from California to Arkansas, back to Texas, and it was in the guy that owned the Ford dealership. It was in his showroom. Kind of a promotional piece. He showed it a little bit. I got pictures from friends that live in Texas. They would see it at different stuff and whatever. And then it sold and went to, I think from there it was the guy that has it now. And him and his wife live full time in Denver, Colorado, but they have a home in Lake Havasu. and that's where they keep the truck. And I was just watching a video a couple weeks ago from the Havasu Deuces car show that they do in March. It's pretty much like 90% 32 Fords, but they let other things in, and they have a section for whatever else isn't a 32 Ford. And some guy was doing a video through the whole event, and there was the truck.
Nice.
You know, and they changed it up a little bit. I mean, it still basically looks the same, but they took it off air and put it on coilovers, and then they put 18s in the front. Took the 20s off the front, put 18s in the front, and which was probably a good call because it you know, on air on 20s, like it had shockwaves in the front. It didn't get very much lift, so it truly was a show truck. Like it
Yeah.
you know, it didn't turn. It didn't, you know, it kind of came out of the trailer, went in a spot, and then it went back in the trailer. And so those guys, you know, they took the air off of it, put it on coilovers, and then put a smaller wheel and tire in the front. So it was, you know, more drivable, if you will.
Well, it's
I mean,
kind
I
of
still drove it, but
it's kind of like my first SEMA build, the one I did in 14. Actually finished it in Vegas, sold it that year at SEMA, dropped it off in Oklahoma City on the way back home. It stayed in Oklahoma for a little bit, got sold, went to Texas, a couple different places, wound up in Georgia. I got sent photos. Hey, your truck's sitting on a car lot in Georgia, and we were on our way to that area. I stopped by and looked at it. I was like, well, I could get it back cheap, redo some stuff on it. And it's one of those ones that across the parking lot, it still looked the same. But once you got up on it, you know, everybody had their hands on it, and it just didn't.
Yeah.
Well, then the funny part is it sold. I had somebody call me that was buying it from that lot, said, yeah, my dad's buying it. You know, had a couple questions about it. I'm like, yeah, you know, I answered it, and it went, I think, to Tennessee. Well, the next thing I know, I'm getting sent pictures from a stereo shop probably 2 miles from my house of it sitting outside. I'm like, there's no way it's made it all the way back to my hometown. And I looked at it. Sure enough, it was sitting 2 miles from my house at a stereo shop, and I get sent pictures about once a week of it somewhere in town. So
wow, that's cool. That's what a cool story, man. You know, none of mine are obviously that close. I mean, you know, Red Rockers in, you know, Phoenix basically, and it still looks really good. I mean, when I saw it at Dino's in 2020, I mean, you know, the caretakers over the years, you can only hope when you sell something that you know, the lineage down the line is going to take as good a care of it, you know, as you did. But Fester's taking really good care of it. Max took great care of it. I think the only guy that didn't really take the best care of it was the guy I sold it to, but luckily he didn't have it very long. So when Max got it, he kind of had a lot of cleanup to do. There was no body damage or anything like that. It had just been neglected, you know?
Yeah.
So Max kind of went back and sort of restored it to its former, you know, glory, and all that. But, and in the F100, I mean, at least from videos, it looks good. I haven't seen it in person. I do know one of my trucks, it didn't fare well, and that was the 90, you know, short bed that kind of the first one that I had after my original first truck, Black Square, was that regular cab shorty with the flames and the 18s and 20s. And that truck is up in like Fresno, California, and it's languishing in a driveway, and it's basically dead, you know? So it's sad, but.
Well, in 19, I wasn't going to build a SEMA vehicle that year. And the guy that I'd sold my 14 build to in Oklahoma, they wound up passing, him and his wife wound up getting in a bad crash and passed away. And I was still friends with the son. Like, he brought it to LST one year, and, you know, we hung out. And he reached out and said, hey, you know, we cleared my, you know, parents' estate out. We're unloading stuff. Would you be interested in buying the truck back? And it really didn't have that many miles on it since I sold it. And it's like, oh, that would be a cool story to, you know, 5 years later, refresh it, drive it back to SEMA again. And we were talking numbers, and then he just ghosted me. And it already had my wheels turning. I'm like, okay, now I want to build something this year. And that's when I decided on the Ram to build Cranberry. Had ordered the Ram, and the dealership I ordered it from was 2 hours away. Well, we were driving to pick the Ram up. They called and said, hey, your truck came here. And I said, cool, I'll be there tomorrow after work. We were 2 miles from the dealership, And the dude that had my 14 build called and said, "Hey, we're serious about selling it now. Do you still want it?" I'm like, "I'm 2 miles from buying my next truck." I was like, "There's no way I can." And it just, but
Yeah.
him putting that for sale made me decide to build another one. So,
Sure.
but then it winds
No,
up.
definitely. It's kind of interesting when you really think about it. Previously I did say, if out of all of them, if I could get any of one of them back, it would be the Red Rocker truck. And yes and no. Like, yes, it would be cool to have it back, but the flip side of that is like, I'm in a different time period in my life now.
Yeah,
Like I can't replicate the time period that of when I owned that truck the first time. Like, I'm not, there was so much excitement and everything behind that truck and building it and going to Texas and hanging out with those guys and all of that, and the adventure of like putting the truck together and getting it done and showing it, and it being kind of like the hot new square body at the time on the scene, and
yeah,
then all of that, and then driving it. Like, I don't think it would be the same owning it now as it was then, if that makes any sense.
totally.
You know, so it would be one of those things if I had just tons of disposable income and
You won the
resources and
lottery.
I had a huge building to put all these things in. Okay, cool. That's my old show truck. Sweet. It's nice to have it back. But I'm kind of focused more on like trucks that are a little bit more um God, it's gonna make me sound old, but like usable now.
Yeah.
Like my C10, like it's just lowered, it's a 6.8 drop with 20-inch Halbrands on it, and the bed is not pretty, but I can put things in the bed of it. Like I put my dad's vintage motorcycle in it, and you know, um, I can kind of use it somewhat as a truck, and the paint's kind of got nicks and chips and a little bit of patina, and I'm kind of getting to that point where I really like that because I don't have to be a slave to it.
You don't have to be scared of it.
I'm not scared of it. Yeah, I just get in and go and drive it, Um, and I think some of that's age. It's like we've had the full blown show trucks and they're bitching. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there's nothing cooler, dude, but they do occupy quite a bit of your time, and they require a lot of upkeep and a lot of maintenance,
Well, it's like my Sierra this year. It being static. I drove it across the country. Don't have to worry about airbags, none of that stuff. And I want the same
Right.
way. I wanted something more usable per se. So
Yeah, and I think the other thing is I'm sort of, gravitating towards, old school trends that I employed when I first got into doing this stuff, and that
yeah,
was like a Beltec, 5.7 drop. I mean, I have a 98 two-door two-wheel drive Tahoe too, and that's just got a Beltec, 5.7 static drop on it, and it's I guess I'm a creature of habit because it's bright red and I'm a red guy, and I like red, and it's got the OBS signature OBS curves and body lines and all that, but it's a driver, and I think I'm getting to that point now where I really appreciate just a good driver. Something that's cool, it'll turn heads, but um I don't have to be a slave to it. That F100 was really bitching, dude. Don't get me wrong, but I think that cured me of that because it went in and out of a trailer, and it took 2 full days to get ready to take it anywhere. And nowadays, I'm kind of like, oh, little detail bag with some quick detailer, a couple microfibers, some tire dressing, and some glass cleaner, and you can do the chrome with the glass cleaner.
yep.
So you don't even need to bring chrome cleaner with you.
That's why I don't
you
have
know,
polished wheels on my truck. It's like I don't want them. I want something I can clean. They're brushed and cleared. I can just spray them and wipe them and not worry about it. And
perfect.
yep,
I
makes
think a lot of it comes down to available time too. Like when I was early 20s, I had the time to spend, a full, 14 hours in the garage, like, washing, waxing, polishing,
yeah,
cleaning, detailing, and all that stuff. I just don't have that much available time anymore, Um, so I still want to do it, but I need wheels that I can, hit the machine barrels with some quick detailer, and the centers are, matte gray and they're easy, but that's kind of where I'm at now. I just enjoy a good driver that I can actually drive to the event and not have to put on or in a trailer. And
if it rains, it rains. Well, y'all don't get much rain out there, so
yeah, if it rains, it is what it is, so yeah,
out
but
there it's more if y'all get a dust storm or not.
they do happen. You try to plan, the best you can for them, but they do happen. It's gonna be kind of fun. Like next year, this year we're gonna go to Dino's again, and we're gonna take both trucks down, and I'm gonna drive my square, and my girlfriend's gonna drive the 2-door, and
Nice.
we're gonna come down and spend a couple days. We had a really good time last year, down there and hanging out, and I mean, it's just amazing what Dino's done with that event. I mean, I went to the first one at his house, and it was a barbecue. Like, it was hot dogs and burgers and like 12 trucks.
Yeah.
And look what it's turned into now, and he's done a really cool thing for the custom truck community.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people have kind of been inspired to get into this just because of that event. It's
no trophy,
awesome.
no entry, no spectator, just show up and have fun.
Yeah, all the reasons that someone really should be into it.
Yep.
It's for the camaraderie, and sharing a common interest and a common passion. If you're in it for the trophies and the awards, then you're in it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
But
well, I appreciate you coming, hanging out. We've known each other for a long time now, and I see you once a year when I just bump into you walking through the halls of SEMA is about it. So
yeah, I appreciate it, Brandon. I appreciate you having me on, man. I still have a deep love for this stuff and custom trucks and the scene, and at the end of the day, the people, man. I think as I get older, that's what I really come to value is the people, like yourself, and just there's a lot of really good people, in the industry and into the show trucks and into the scene, and that's really the takeaway. That's kind of really the value proposition as I exited the business was like, hey, yeah, I know I'm not going to be carrying a camera around anymore and going to shows, but I all these people are still my friends.
yeah. Well, I know right after I got that, when I got the call about the editor job at Street Trucks, we already had that trip planned to Vegas. That's why I called and said, hey, let's sit down and chat, give me your ins and outs. You've done it before, and what I should and shouldn't look for, and go from there. So, I definitely appreciated your input on that for the time I did it. So that was definitely of an insight to have a firsthand experience, even though it's different than it is now. So
absolutely. No, I was honored that you reached out to ask, for that, to sit down for that lunch and to just chat. That meant a lot to me. That, my work obviously made, over the years had made a statement and an impression that, you felt that it was worth the time to sit down with me. So that meant a lot to me. And it was you did an incredible job. I mean, I watched the book in the time that you were running it, and it really showed that you cared a lot about the product and what you were putting into it. So,
and from that to come from someone like you that's been in that role, that's all the accolades I need, that someone noticed that had done that position. That makes me happy, and I can end it with that. I'm okay with it. So
good, man. Glad to hear it. Well, again, thanks for having me on, man, and allowing me to kind of share my, story with this stuff, and the story continues. I'm still kind of knocking around and jacking with trucks and playing with trucks and going to a few shows. I don't get out, to as many events kind of as I used to. I do a lot of stuff in my little town here, Boulder City, Nevada. There's a lot of car shows just locally here that I do. Yeah, it kind of comes down to that available time thing too. It's like, we're doing other things. We do a lot of boating in the summer, and then, the car shows here and all that. But we do have a select couple shows we try to get to, and that's Dino's. We like to make it to Good Guys, Scottsdale, and
Yeah.
So we still get out and about, as much as we can, but I'm still enjoying it. It's just a little bit more distant these days, and my dad's a hot rodder, so I've been spending a lot more time kind of at events with him too, which has been really cool. Yeah.
Well, how do people find you if they want to see what you are involved with? Even though there is a lot of pictures of big commercial buildings, but you do throw some trucks in there every now and then. So how do people find you?
Yeah, either Facebook or Instagram. I have a Facebook. It's just my name, Travis Noack. And then on Instagram, my Instagram is at Noack, my last name, Noack 1976, is where you can find me. There's probably more truck stuff and more hot rod stuff on Instagram than there is on Facebook. Facebook's a little bit more sporadic, but I do post on both.
Yeah. All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on, and I guess I'll see you again here in November in Vegas.
You got it. Let's try to make it sooner than that, Brandon.
All right, man. Appreciate it.
Have a good night.